Hey, it's Vanessa the Crafty Gemini. Thanks for joining me for part 2 of my modern quilt along video series. We're working on this really pretty modern quilt I designed for you all. It's called Keys Afloat, and here are just some pictures of the front and some of the backing so you can see how it turned out when it was finished. If you're new to the series, make sure you click right here so you can watch part 1 before watching this video. Now if you're here for part 2, let's get started. Today we're going to be cutting into the textured solid fabrics by Andover Fabrics, and we're going to piece the entire quilt top together. So the first fabric we're cutting into is our ripple fabric, and I need you to get 1 2/3 yards of this. I have it folded just like it came off the bolt. I'm slipping an ironing surface right underneath because I like to starch my fabric and press it before I get ready to cut it. Once your ripple fabric is pressed, you want to open it up on the fold and you want to fold it the other direction. The reason we're doing this is that the strips we need are 54.5 inches, and that's a lot longer than the width measurement of the fabric the way it comes off the bolt. So just fold it the other way, press out that center crease that we have from the initial fold, and now we can cut our strips. So I like to fold it up just so it's a little more manageable for me. And then I'm going to take off just a little bit of fabric off the edge so it's a nice clean straight edge that I'm working with. Now the strips that I need to cut measure 6.5 inches wide, which luckily my ruler just happens to measure 6.5 inches wide. So all I need to do is bump up another ruler there, and I know that the strip is going to be the correct size because it's exactly the width of my first ruler. So we get one long strip that should measure 60 inches if you got the 1 2/3 yards of the ripple fabric, and you're going to repeat that a couple of more times. You want to get a total of 3 strips. Now 2 of those strips are going to be cut down to 54.5 inches long, okay? So what I did was I kept the fold here on my left. I lined it up at the 27 1/4 inch mark on my cutting mat. I don't normally do that, but because this strip is so long, I'm going to go for it, okay? It's not that big of a deal. Just try to keep everything lined up nicely. And then I'm cutting the excess off at the 0 mark on the cutting mat. So the full strip ends up being 54.5 inches long, right? By the 6.5. And so you want to do that for 2 of the strips. And for the third strip, you're going to be cutting it down into a bunch of different chunks, okay? So let me show you here exactly what pieces you need to cut out of these strips. So to start, we have the 2 full strips that are the 6.5 by 54.5. Then we have one here next to it, which is 24.5 inches long by 6.5. Then you have 21.5, a little block that measures 6.5 by 6.5, and the smallest one is just 6.5 by 3.5. Okay, so these are all the pieces that you need from this fabric to get started with the quilt top. Now you need to prep your white lies fabric the same way that we did the ripple fabric, and by that I mean to open it up on the fold that it has originally as it comes off the bolt and fold it along the crosswise grain instead of the lengthwise grain. Then you're going to cut 4 strips the same width again, 6.5 inches wide by the 60 inches because you need 1 2/3 yard of this white fabric as well. Now trim down 3 of the 4 strips to the 54.5 inch length, just like you did with the ripple fabric. And then from the 4th strip, we're going to have to cut out a few different pieces. So here's exactly what you need from the white fabric. 3 full strips at 6.5 by 54.5 inches, 18.5 long, 15.5 long, 12.5 inches long, and the last one is 9.5 inches long. And remember that we're always keeping that 6.5 inch width. And now we get to cut into these fun bright colors. So we have a 1/4 yard of each of these 3, and then you really only need 1/4 yard of the orange, which is called mandarin as well, but I have more because I'm using it for my backing. So I went ahead and got 4 full yards, okay, for that, and that's going to be for the quilt top and the backing. So you need 4 different fabrics and a 1/4 yard of each. Let's get started with the first one. This color here is called rhubarb, and I'm going to just fold it up and trim off the edge, and then measuring again the 6.5 inches wide, I'm going to cut 1 strip. And then we just need to go back and trim it down to size because we just want one piece that's the 6.5 inches wide by 27.5 inches. And then repeat that 3 other times till you get 4 strips, 1 of each of these colors, and they all measure exactly the same, okay? 6.5 inches by 27.5 inches. Then you can take the strips to your design wall, and mine is just a piece of batting that I've thumbtacked into the wall. You can see the solid strips are the first and last ripple color, and then every other strip, the white ones in the middle, are all solids. The smaller ones, you see why we cut different pieces of the white and of the ripple fabric, and that's because those go in to fill in the spaces to create full strips from the bright colors, okay? And that's exactly how you're going to piece it. Use your 1/4 inch seam, and we want to put together the different columns so that they're solid strips, just like the solid colors that we have in the quilt. So do that first, and then once you have all your strips, you can sew each one side by side until the quilt top is complete. And feel free to make this design totally your own by flipping around some of the strips to get a different design. Once you have the finished layout you want, start grabbing strips and piecing them together. And here you can see I'm almost done. That side is pieced, and so are these 2 strips. So now I just have to put these 2 together and the quilt top will be done. Now you can pin your fabrics if you want, but I tend to just go little by little, making sure that the raw edges are matched up using that 1/4 inch seam allowance and making sure that my stitch line is as straight as I can get it. Now for pressing, I like to just press the seam just as it was sewn first, and then I open it up, and generally I'll press the seam towards the darker fabric. I like to press every single seam I sew, so try to get in the habit of doing that. It just gives for a cleaner, more professional finish. Then grab yourself a measuring tape and go ahead and take some measurements of your quilt and jot them down. Then meet me back here next Thursday when I bring you part 3 of my Modern Quilt Along video series. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit it with the thumbs up. Don't forget to share it across the different social media sites and click the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of my future video tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!